Okay, so, like, picture this, right? It's just a few days before the 2024 election, and you're scrolling through the news. Every headline's about a different poll. Harris is up. No, wait, Trump is surging. Ugh, it's enough to make your head spin, right?
It really is.
So today, we're going to try to cut through all that noise. We're diving deep into this recent Forbes article. It's called Trump vs. Harris 2024 Polls. Harris leads in. Latest two surveys, as most polls show razor-thin race. We really want to figure out what's really going on in this election.
Yeah, we're going to go beyond just like who's ahead. We're going to try to understand what's driving these numbers, what factors are at play.
Exactly, because let's be real, polls just give you like a snapshot in time, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's like you're trying to figure out how a movie ends, but you've only seen like one still image.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
There's a whole story unfolding here, and we're going to uncover it.
Absolutely. And speaking of the big picture, like the overall trend we're seeing, it's that this is a super tight race, like across almost all the polls.
Okay, so paint a picture for us. How close are we talking?
Well, in a lot of these polls, Harris and Trump are within the margin of error.
Okay, and for those of us who maybe don't follow polls that closely, remind us what margin of error means.
Yeah, of course. So the margin of error, it's kind of like built-in wiggle room for polls because the actual support for each candidate, it could be a bit higher or lower than what the poll actually says. It's kind of like, when you're baking a cake and the recipe says 1 cup of flour, give or take a tablespoon, that give or take part, that's basically like the margin of error.
So even if a poll shows one candidate a little bit ahead, they might actually be neck and neck.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to look at like trends across multiple polls instead of just, fixating on just one single result.
Right. Look at the big picture.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the details. We keep hearing these headlines about Harris leading in some recent polls. Fill us in. What's happening there?
Yeah, so the ABC Ipsos poll and the CBS YouGov poll, they both show Harris with a slight lead. But, and this is important, these leads are actually shrinking compared to earlier polls. It's like, if you're watching a marathon, someone might be ahead at mile 10, but that doesn't mean they're going to win the race, right?
So even though Harris is ahead in those polls, the momentum, it might be shifting. I'm already getting nervous.
Absolutely. And this potential shift, it's even more clear when you look at the Emerson College poll. They consistently had Harris ahead in previous polls, but their newest one, it shows a tie. Dead heat. Harris and Trump both at 49%.
Whoa, okay, that's a pretty big shift.
Yeah.
What do you think is causing that?
Well, it's tough to say for sure, but it could mean that, something's changed in voters' minds. Could be the economy or, maybe a recent campaign event or even just like the general mood of the country.
Okay, so we've got shrinking leads for Harris and now a tie in a poll that used to favor her. Her campaign's got to be feeling the pressure.
For sure. And there's another tie that's particularly interesting. It's the Time Siena poll. It has them deadlocked at 48%.
Another tie. Okay, but what makes this one stand out? Why is this one important?
Well, think about this. Democrats usually win the popular vote, even in close elections. Historically, that's the trend. So for Harris to be tied in this poll, it might be a sign that maybe she's not energizing her base as effectively as we've seen with other Democratic candidates.
So are we seeing any polls where Trump is actually pulling ahead?
Yeah, there are a few. The CNBC poll, the Wall Street Journal poll, and the Harris x Forbes poll, they all give Trump a small, but, it's still a lead.
Interesting. What do you think is contributing to those bumps for Trump in the polls?
Well, one factor could be that we're seeing growing enthusiasm among Republican voters. And remember, voter turnout is key.
Right. It all comes down to who actually shows up to vote.
Right. If Republicans are more motivated to actually go to the polls, that could make a huge difference.
Okay, but we've been talking about the national picture. And of course, it's more complicated than that. It's not just about the overall popular vote, is it? What about those all-important swing states?
Ah, yes, the Electoral College. This is where things get even more interesting. It's not just about who wins the most votes overall.
Right, right.
You got to win those key swing states.
So walk us through it. What are those swing states looking like right now, based on the polls we have?
Okay, so based on the current polling data, Harris is leading in Michigan and Nevada. But Trump is ahead in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina.
And I bet we can't forget about Georgia and Arizona.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Those two are basically toss-ups right now, which makes them huge potential game changers.
So even if a candidate is ahead in the national polls, if they lose those key swing states, it's over.
That's exactly right. It shows just how crucial those swing states are. They can completely determine who wins the election.
Okay, so we've got a tight national race, A&D, a battle for swing states.
Hmm.
Are there any, like, specific groups of voters, any demographics we should be watching closely?
Definitely. The Latino vote, it's going to be super important in this election.
Yeah, didn't the NBC News poll have something about that?
They did. That poll shows Harris leading among Latino voters, but her lead is much smaller compared to previous elections. It's a significant drop.
Wow, okay, so what's going on there? Why is that happening?
It's a good question. It makes you wonder, can Harris re-energize those Latino voters and get back that stronger level of support?
Right.
Or could Trump make inroads with that demographic?
It's a trend we definitely need to keep an eye on. Every little detail matters in a race this close, it seems like. But hold on, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we have to talk about something big that just happened, something that could shake things up,
Mm.
the presidential debate.
Oh, yeah, that was a major moment in the campaign. And most of the polls after the debate, they showed Harris as the winner, but
But what? Did it give her a boost in the polls? Did it move the needle?
not really, no. There wasn't a significant bump for Harris after that debate.
Hmm. So does that mean that debates just aren't as important anymore? Like they don't have the influence they used to?
You know, that's a great question. It's hard to say for sure. Maybe in today's world where it seems like everyone is already so set in their political views, debates just don't change people's minds as much as they used to. Or
Yeah.
maybe, this specific debate, maybe it just didn't have those like super memorable, game-changing moments that can really shift how the public sees the candidates. Either way, it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, it's interesting. It really makes you wonder how people are forming their political opinions these days. Like, what are the factors that are
Yeah.
really influencing them? It feels like things are shifting.
Okay, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
serious. What kind of shift are we talking about? Well, it used to be that political identities, they felt a lot more, I don't know, fixed. Like you were either a Democrat or a Republican, and that was that. But now you see so many more voters who are willing to cross party lines
Right, right.
or consider candidates from like different parties than they might have in the past.
It feels like that old us versus them mentality. Maybe it's not as strong as it used to be.
Exactly. People are looking beyond those traditional labels. They're focusing more on the actual issues, the policies.
So how do we make sense of this new landscape, this new way of thinking about politics? Like, what should we be paying attention to if we want to understand what's motivating voters?
I think it's all about figuring out, like, what are the issues that are really resonating with people? What are their top concerns? And, the economy, that's always a big factor in presidential elections. Always has been.
Right, because if people are feeling good about their finances, they're probably more likely to stick with, whichever party's already in power. But if people are feeling uncertain, like anxious about the economy, then they might be more open to change.
Exactly. And we're actually seeing that play out in some of those polls we were talking about earlier. Concerns about the economy, that seems to be giving Trump a bit of an edge in some of those polls.
But it's not just about the economy, right?
Mm.
Like social issues, cultural issues, those are really important to voters too.
Oh, absolutely. Issues like climate change, health care, social justice. These are top of mind for a lot of voters, especially like younger voters,
And those are the kinds of issues that can cut across those traditional party lines.
for sure.
Like you might have someone who, generally leans towards one party but is willing to vote for someone from the other party. If that other candidate's views on these like really crucial social issues, if their views align more with their own.
Yeah, you're right. It's not as simple as just red versus blue anymore. It's much more nuanced than that. It's about individual beliefs and how those beliefs line up with, with specific policy positions.
So it sounds like this election is shaping up to be a battle for like the hearts and minds of voters who are, I don't know, maybe a bit more independent,
Maybe.
less focused on party labels and more focused on those issues that really matter to them personally. It's like they're saying, show me what you actually stand for, not just who you're aligned with.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And there's this whole other layer to this we haven't even touched on yet. It's the impact of like external events, things that happen out in the world. They can have a huge impact on an election.
Ooh, okay. I like where this is going. Give me an example. Like what kind of external events?
Well, imagine like a major international event. Something big happens, just weeks before the election.
Okay, yeah.
It grabs everyone's attention and it could totally influence how voters view the candidates.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like how they would handle that crisis.
Exactly. Or even like their leadership qualities in general.
It's that classic, like, October surprise scenario, right? Something totally unexpected pops up and throws a wrench in the whole race.
And it doesn't even have to be like an international thing. It could be a huge economic shift, a natural disaster,
Right.
or even like a personal scandal involving one of the candidates. These things, they can be unpredictable, but man, they can have a huge effect on how people are feeling and who they end up voting for.
Yeah, it's like this whole election is playing out against this backdrop of like uncertainty. You never know what's going to happen next.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and that makes it exciting, but also like nerve-wracking at the same time.
Oh, for sure. Okay, but speaking of things that can influence an election, we haven't talked about one of the biggest players yet,
Hmm.
the media. They have a huge role in shaping public opinion, especially during an election.
Oh, yeah. The media, that's a whole other deep dive in itself. But there's no question they play a major role. They frame the narrative. They tell us how to think about the candidates, the issues, the whole election, really.
It's like they're the lens through which we view the election. But there are so many different media outlets, so many different perspectives out there. How do we know what to trust?
That's such a good point. That's why it's so important to be, like, media literate, to think critically about the information you're getting and to recognize that different outlets, they might have their own biases.
Right, so it's not just about blindly accepting everything you hear or read.
No, not at all.
You got to think for yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we navigate this media landscape, especially during an election? Any tips for us?
My advice, diversify your media consumption.
Hmm.
Don't just rely on one source for all your information.
Okay.
Seek out different perspectives from a variety of outlets and be open to, maybe challenging your own assumptions.
I love that. Diversify your media consumption. It's like creating a balanced diet, but for your mind.
Exactly. Just like a balanced diet keeps your body healthy, a balanced media diet can help you form opinions that are, more informed and more nuanced.
And that's what it's all about, right? Engaging in thoughtful discussion, thinking critically about the issues, the candidates,
Yeah.
so that we can make the best decisions when it comes time to vote.
Absolutely. It's easy to get swept up in the emotion of an election, but we have to step back and really analyze the information we're getting. Think it through. Because the decisions we make in that voting booth, they have real-world consequences.
That's a powerful reminder. Okay, so we've talked about the polls, the candidates, the issues, the media. We talked about how the political landscape is changing, how unpredictable things can be. What else should we be keeping in mind as we head into the final stretch of this election?
Well, we can't forget about the power of grassroots organizing.
Yeah.
Getting people out there to vote.
Ah, yes, those people on the ground, making phone calls, knocking on doors, rallying the troops. That's where the real work happens.
Exactly. And in an election like this, that's super close, where every vote could make the difference. Those efforts to get people to the polls, they can be game changers.
It really is a reminder that every single vote counts, that even small actions, they can have a ripple effect.
And that's why it's so important to be engaged, to participate in the process, not just by voting, but by volunteering, or donating to a campaign you support, or even just talking to your friends and family about the issues that matter to you.
It's about reminding ourselves that we have power as citizens. We can shape the future of our country.
I love that. And it brings up a question for you, our listener. What role do you want to play in this election? How will you use your voice?
It's a call to action.
How will you use your vote, your influence, to make a difference?
Because this election, like all elections, it's about more than just who wins and who loses.
Right.
It's a reflection of who we are as a nation, the choices we're making about our collective future.
And speaking of the future, it's fascinating to think about how this election, regardless of who wins, it's going to shape the political landscape for years to come.
Ooh, yeah, that's a big one. What are you thinking about specifically?
Well, I think we could see some major changes within the parties themselves, like a realignment of sorts. Certain factions might gain more power, or new coalitions could form. Who knows?
So even after all the votes are counted and we have a winner, the political drama, it might not be over.
Not at all. The aftermath of this election, it could be just as exciting to watch as the campaign itself. We might see new political stars emerge, new issues become front and center, and the whole dynamic between the parties, it could shift dramatically.
It's like the end of one chapter and the beginning of a whole new one. And we, the voters, we get to be part of writing that next chapter.
Exactly. And that's a pretty powerful thought. We have the power to shape the future, not just through our vote, but through our ongoing participation in the political process.
It's a good reminder that democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires us to be active participants.
And speaking of participation, one thing that's been so interesting in this election is the role of technology. the way it's being used to, like, engage voters.
Yeah.
Candidates are using social media, online fundraising platforms, data analytics, and they're doing it in ways we've never seen before.
It's like campaigning has gone digital.
Hmm.
But how is that changing the way people are getting their information?
Yeah.
Like, how is it affecting their decisions about who to vote for?
That's the million-dollar question. On one hand, these digital tools, they can be amazing. They can make it so much easier for candidates to connect with voters directly, get their messages out there, build support.
So, in a way, it can be a really powerful tool for, like, boosting democratic engagement.
Totally. But, and this is a big but, there's also a potential downside here. With the rise of social media, we've seen a huge increase in the spread of misinformation and disinformation. It can be really hard for voters to sort through all that noise and figure out what's actually true.
Right, because you can't just believe everything you read online.
Exactly. It's like navigating a minefield of information out there. You really got to be careful.
So what can we do? How do we make sure we're getting good, reliable information and not falling for, like, those online traps?
Well, one thing you can do is, make sure you're getting your information from a variety of sources. Don't just rely on social media for all your news.
Oh, yeah.
Check out reputable news organizations, fact-checking websites, government websites even, to get a more balanced view.
It's a don't put all your eggs in one basket strategy.
Exactly.
I like that.
And another thing is, try to be aware of your own biases. We all have them, and they can really affect how we process information. So try to be open to different viewpoints, even if they challenge your own beliefs.
Be open to having your mind change, or at least expanded by what you learn.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about this election. It's a time of, like, intense debate, information overload, and shifting perspectives. It's a moment when, as a country, we're really wrestling with some huge questions about who we are, what we stand for, and what kind of future we want.
It's like we're standing at a crossroads trying to figure out which path to take. And there are all these different voices calling out to us, all these different visions of the way forward.
And that's where it becomes crucial to really listen, to think critically, and to make a choice that feels right for you.
A choice that reflects your values and your hopes for the future.
And your vote. Don't forget to vote.
Yes. Get out there and vote.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that when we vote, we're not just choosing a candidate. We're choosing, like, a direction for the future.
And that future is being shaped right now. Like, literally right now. In conversations that are happening all over the country.
In living rooms, at coffee shops, online forums, town hall meetings.
People are having these debates, these discussions. They're wrestling with these big questions about where we go from here.
And that's what's so cool about democracy, right? Is that engagement. When we actually talk to each other, listen to each other, even when, we don't always agree.
Especially when we disagree.
Exactly. It's in those moments, those sometimes, like, heated debates, that we really figure out what we believe.
We challenge our own assumptions.
Yeah, and we start to, like, build this shared vision for the kind of country we want to live in.
So as we get closer to Election Day, let's not just get caught up in the horse race aspect of it all.
Yeah.
Who's up, who's down in the polls.
Right.
Let's really engage in those conversations, listen to each other, even when it's hard.
Let's try to understand where other people are coming from, why they believe what they believe. And let's remember that no matter who wins this election, we all have a role to play in shaping the future of our democracy.
And that starts with each and every one of us.
So, as you continue to follow this election, ask yourself, what kind of future do I want to see?
What kind of country do I want to live in?
And how can I use my voice, my vote, my actions to help make that future a reality?
Because this election, it's about so much more than just politics.
Yeah, it really is.
It's about who we are, who we want to be.
This deep dive, it's given you the tools to understand just how complex this election really is. But now it's up to you to use those tools. Make informed choices, have those tough conversations.
And most importantly, cast your vote. Make your voice heard. Because your voice matters.
Your vote matters.
And together, we can shape the future.